Hello, my name is Matthew Vaught, and I am a third-year law student at the George Washington University Law School, and I am pursuing my JD with concentration in government procurement law. Previously, I interned for the General Services Administration in the Office of General Counsel in the Real Property Division. Currently, I work as a legal associate for Freedom Technologies, Inc., conducting a policy analysis on electromagnetic spectrum policy as well as national security policy. Today, I will be presenting proposed reform for the MPC and requiring an independent estimate. During this presentation, I will be predominantly focusing on comparing and contrasting guidance by the Office of Management and Budget Uniform Grants Guidance with the Model Procurement Code guidance, and the lack of instruction provided by the MPC regarding the need for an independent estimate. Additionally, I will be discussing relevant examples of independent estimate requirements at the state and local levels. Lastly, I will be covering considerations for the proposed revision and potential issues for mitigation. Let's get started. The Model Procurement Code is intended to provide state and local governments with a template to tailor their specific guidance on procurement requirements. The guidance should provide beneficial directions for state and local government procurement processes and sufficient direction to comply with federal government requirements. The issue to be addressed arises in part from the Office of Management and Budget Uniform Guidance, requiring an independent estimate laid out in 2 CFR section 200.324. The MPC fails to provide guidance on an independent estimate, despite it being legally required in many circumstances and beneficial conduct in general. The presentation will focus on revising the MPC to harmonize federal grants guidance with state and local procurement guidance, and ultimately promote the performance of fiduciary duties of ethical and efficient spending by a government and ensure a more informed procurement process. As a good starting point, the current OMB Uniform Grants Guidance states that the recipient of federal grants must conduct independent analysis and obtain estimates before receiving bids. As can be seen by the text highlighted in red, the guidance specifically provides that non-federal entities must make independent estimates before receiving bids or proposals, and that the methods and degree of analysis is dependent on the facts surrounding the particular procurement situation. The guidance is noteworthy not only because of the requirement it places on non-federal entities, but also for the relative flexibility in its possible application, specifically not providing overly burdensome requirements for entities that are ill-suited to facilitate them, but rather allowing analysis to depend on the facts and ultimately promote efficient and adequate information gathering. As a relevant point to this discussion, as of September, the current administration released suggested changes to OMB guidance. However, as illustrated by the highlighted portion in red at the bottom of the page, despite language modifications in the relevant section, the essential requirement for prior independent estimates remains a part of the guidance and still goes to demonstrate, as will be seen in the next slide, that the MPC should establish guidance in privity. Throughout my research into the MPC, I was unable to find relevant guidance provided for state and local governments to conduct prior independent estimates before solicitation. The closest guidance provided on the matter is covered in Section 3-403 of the MPC. However, as can be seen in the relevant text here, the provision is noticeably lacking any estimation requirements prior to solicitation. Estimations conducted prior to solicitation has a benefit of providing uninfluenced information to the offer, whereas post hoc evaluations of pricing or costs will do little for effective budgeting and ensuring the government's money is being appropriately allocated before investing resources and time into solicitation process. Here I have highlighted just a few of the codes and ordinances that are utilized throughout states and local governments to require independent estimates prior to reviewing solicitations. To highlight just a few of the provisions on this page, both Alabama and Arizona ordinances specifically reference the OMB guidance found in section 200.324, and specifically the need for prior independent estimates. The language provided in the local ordinances fall directly in line with similar language to the OMB guidance, and while they provide useful requirements for independent evaluations, they refrain from overburdensome requirements and merely describe the requirement of conducting an independent estimate prior to opening bids or conducting solicitations. Each one of the subsequent provisions on the slide have taken similar approaches. I would also like to note the Iowa Code, fifth from the top of the slide, which requires negotiation of contracts related to architecture, landscape architecture, engineering, and related professional and technical services. The code requires the department to prepare an independent estimate of the code of the proposed services, including a detailed estimate. Once again, this state requirement promotes the value of obtaining an independent estimate, which also provides understanding context and size of the project should dictate the scope of the estimate. The state and local independent estimate requirements are noteworthy, not only because they represent understanding of a requirement by OMB guidance, but also because they demonstrate good practice for governments to obtain their own information prior to outside influence, which can of course be adjusted, and ultimately provide an appropriate starting place for budgeting and understanding allocation possibilities. Following the discussion of OMB grants guidance requiring independent estimates prior to solicitation from non-federal entities, and the illustration of many different types of laws at the state and local level requiring independent estimates in compliance with OMB guidance, and for the sake of requiring collection of information that is useful for government procurements, I would like to talk about codifying in the MPC a requirement for offers to obtain an independent estimate prior to solicitation. After evaluating OMB guidance, state and local provisions, the MPC text should include an independent estimate requirement, and the specific guidance should address whether 1. An independent estimate will be required for all procurement transactions. I would lean towards including it and allowing states to redact it if they feel it necessary. 2. At what time the independent estimate must be completed. As per most of the guidance I have found, it should be conducted before solicitation to reduce unintended influence, as opposed to simply before opening of the bid solicitation itself. 3. It should address the minimum information the estimate must be based on. 4. The minimum requirements for an independent estimate. And 5. How long an estimate will be held before potential release. Specifically, ensuring independent estimates are generally precluded from public disclosure should help mitigate issues related to price signaling to the marketplace. I included the MPC section below as a possible place for including the needed text, as it seems like one of the more applicable places to insert it within the MPC. However, there are countless places that it could be ultimately inserted. When considering including new language to the MPC, it is important to address possible issues that may arise from including new text and possible ways to mitigate those issues. I have outlined 4 possible issues that could occur and some of the best ways to address them. For starters, source selection issues may arise if the independent estimate is used as a hardline number that reduces participants merely based on an initial assessment by the government. New independent estimate requirements should be drafted to ensure competition is not unnecessarily reduced, or the selection of sources skewed in a manner that creates unintended disadvantages or benefits to potential bidders. Next, price signaling could be an issue if the independent estimate is not maintained as confidential information, not for general distribution, as the estimates could lead to price fixing if they are publicly disclosed. Therefore, to reduce the potential of price signaling and the likelihood of price fixing, independent estimates by an offeror should be controlled and generally considered confidential information not to be publicly disclosed. In addition, overburdensome requirements through providing a one-size-fits-all guidance on performing independent estimates, the new provision should mitigate unduly restrictive requirements that will unnecessarily reduce competition or result in excessive administrative or logistical costs. Lastly, the offeror should be dissuaded from using the independent estimate as a price realism tool, and mitigating the use of independent estimates as price realism tools should reduce the risk of litigation while still ensuring the estimates can be used to promote an offeror's understanding and budgeting capabilities. With the aforementioned information at hand, I would like to take a look at a federal provision requiring independent estimates, as it provides useful guidance and underlying principles for a future MPC provision. The guidance provided by AFARS on independent estimate requirements demonstrates a regulation that is neither overly restrictive or overburdensome, but remains responsive in providing the offeror with useful guidance. The three main topics addressed in the regulation indicate that an independent estimate should: 1. Contain enough detail to verify the validity of the offeror's proposal, 2. Provide sufficient narrative and analytical detail, and 3. Contain a certification that the estimate was independently developed prior to seeking formal proposals from contractors. While these three criteria provide a very useful starting point, I would still make the inclusion of prohibiting general public disclosure of the independent estimate. Additionally, at the bottom of the page, I have highlighted in red where I pulled the three criteria from the regulation. I would like to conclude this presentation by highlighting the primary purpose of the MPC, which is to provide useful guidance and a general template for state and local procurement codes. As I hope this presentation has made clear, the MPC should be revised to provide guidance incorporating an independent estimate requirement in line with the OMB Uniform Grants Guidance in order to specify a beneficial direction for state and local governments to establish their procurement codes and regulations. In addition, including this proposed provision within the MPC will foster a more widespread practice of offerors gathering information valuable to the procurement process and better equipping agencies to understand fiscal possibilities and restrictions. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope there will be a serious consideration to the inclusion of an independent estimate. Thank you again. Please, if there are any follow-on questions related to this presentation, do not hesitate to contact me at either my personal email provided just below at gmail.com or my law school email, the law.gwu.edu. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing future revisions to the MPC.